Go Mouse Scouts, episode 107.
You're listening to Go Mouse Scouts, where we're dedicated to helping you and your kids have a great day at the Disney parks, whether you're just starting out or a seasoned pro. My name is Kris.
And I'm Megan.
And we have a fun episode this week. We're actually going to talk about having an educational trip to Disneyland. And let me actually get up a quote here. There's actually a quote attributed to Walt Disney, and what he said is, "I would rather entertain and hope that people learned something than educate people and hope that they were entertained." So, I mean, it's an interesting stance on that, because he did a really good job at entertaining people, and Disney every single day does a wonderful job at entertaining. Yet, if you look underneath the surface, there is still so much stuff to be learned, and you may not even realize it, but, you're picking up new things every time you go, So that's what we would like to talk about in this episode, is how to have an educational trip to Disney.
Mm-hmm. As homeschoolers, this is especially relevant to us and others like us. But, even if you're just going on a weekend, or maybe you've pulled the kids out of school for the trip, and you're trying to think, well, the school wants us to, doesn't want us to be leaving unless we're doing something educational. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? Disney can be very educational.
Yeah, so we're kind of breaking this up into kind of three segments. The first one is going to be education that you can bring with you. The second one will be educational offerings that Disney has and that they give you at the parks. And then education that you can find by kind of looking under the surface of things. So let's start off with education that you can bring with you. So what is that?
So this is things that you can do mostly probably while you're waiting in line. This might include, bringing flashcards. I remember one time when my sister was in college, I talked her into going to Disneyland with me that day. She's like, but I really have to study. And I said, hey, bring it with you and we'll study while we stand in line. And we did. So I drilled her on flashcards while we waited in line for all kinds of stuff. And, and she did well on her test afterwards. So we must have done okay with that.
That was for college, wasn't it?
That was for college, uh-huh.
So,
yeah. Yep. So, flashcards in line, you can do drills on math concepts. If your child is learning their multiplication tables, go over the multiplication tables. If they're learning, addition, you can go over addition, whatever. Mm-hmm. If you have, a book that you're reading together, or like, our history book that we read is actually on my phone. So that's something that we can do in line. We can, start reading through one of the chapters. Mm-hmm.
This one really impressed me, because you can actually kind of use the atmosphere in your surroundings, especially with younger kids.
Right. If you have a younger child who's learning, shapes, colors, letters, numbers, any of that, challenge them to find those things around them. Can you find the letter A somewhere? Can you find, the number 3 somewhere? Looking at signs around them. Not only does that, are they, trying to identify things, but then they're also observing their surroundings more, mm-hmm. which is going to be a good skill for later in life as well.
Now, that would have been funny to watch you and your sister doing that. Okay, Rachel, find something that's red. Rachel, what time does that clock say there? She's what, 25 or so at that point or whatever?
20.
Okay, I mean, this was a while ago.
College. But that, that's another thing too, is there's clocks all over the place mm-hmm. for the fast passes and everything. So, if you have a child who's learning how to tell time, ask them to tell you what time the clock says. They have analog as well as digital clocks. So, both are readily available for practice.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that pretty much takes care of the education that you can bring. Mm-hmm. Now, what are some of the educational offerings that Disneyland kind of has for you ready?
Well, at the Disneyland Resort, actually, a lot of it is over at California Adventure. Mm-hmm. But at California Adventure, they have the Animation Academy, where you can actually go and learn how to draw a Disney character, and then you get to take your paper home with you. And you can do that many times throughout the day. There's every half hour, they have one. And it is different characters most of the day. So, I mean, you could draw like 20 different characters during the day.
If you just camp out there.
Yeah.
Academy of Animation or whatever.
There's the Sourdough Bread Factory Tour, which is, there's a little video that stars
Rosie O'Donnell
and Colin Mockery talking about like the history of sourdough. And then you can actually walk through and see the kitchen where Disney makes all of their sourdough bread. And it's really amazing to watch, especially if you get there at just the right time. You can actually see them go from, the mixer to getting, using the machines to get it up into the thing that separates it and rounds it and everything. I mean, it's like, it's really interesting. And our kids actually always love doing that. Mm-hmm. And they could stand there forever and just watch as the bakers go about, their duties. And there's little plaques that explain each step of the process. And it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And, it certainly doesn't hurt that they give you a little piece of, a sample of sourdough bread to munch on while you're going through the thing. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Also at California Adventure is the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail, which is over in Grizzly Peak. And while a lot of people probably look at it as just being like a big play area, because there's lots of, there's like climbing ropes and there's slides and yeah, I mean, there's lots of play stuff. But if you actually walk through the trails in there and stuff, there's a lot of things that talk about the history of California. Mm-hmm. And like, especially like the logging history or the animals that are found there. And I mean, it's really, there's a lot of things to discover there. There's one section of the path that has a whole bunch of different animal tracks. And then there's a sign that shows you which tracks belong to which animal. So you could ask your kids, to find the tracks that were made by different animals. There's also a huge piece of a slice of wood that's from one of those giant trees, probably a giant redwood. And they've put on it like events that happened in history as that tree was growing.
Is that there? Or is that...
There's one there.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Wow, because I remember we saw that up north when we went to visit the
There's
Redwoods,
one up north too, but if you go inside... just when you go through the Redwood Creek, the entrance, turn to the right and head that way. And there's one there.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing about the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail is that you can also get this little booklet that you go around and you learn things and you do little activities or whatever, and you get a sticker that you can put into the book that signifies you completing that little thing. Mm-hmm. And so that would be something tangible that the kid could take back, to school and say, look what I learned, kind of thing. Uh-huh. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And then over at Disneyland, of course, there's the great moments with with President Lincoln or Mr. Lincoln or whatever they call it. Anyway, and it talks about some American history, and then it also has Lincoln reciting the Gettysburg Address. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's more historical than that, right?
That's pretty good. Yeah. Yep. And then even after the fact, once you leave the theater, they have, there's on display like different pictures and portraits of people throughout history. And don't they have different artifacts and stuff?
Most of the artifacts are before you go in. There's actually
a
lot of stuff about like the history of Disneyland there. There's like a model map of the park when it opened.
Okay.
You're thinking of different artifacts.
I think I might be thinking of the exit from the Hall of Presidents then at Disney World.
Could be.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna have to go back and check that out because I would like to see the great moments with Mr. Lincoln again. Anyway.
Also, if you head over to Frontierland and go in the entrance through the fort there, right from the central hub, if you then turn around right after you've walked through the entrance with the fort, and you turn around and look at the sides of the fort, they've actually got different flags up from different eras of the early American history.
Wow,
with plaques that talk about some of those things and some of the early settlers of the West and things like that. So, I mean, that's, something that's, again, lots of history there at Disneyland.
There's plenty of things that you can do at Disneyland to learn things, and they certainly make learning fun as well. So those are the first two groupings. The last one is kind of education you can find mainly through discussion about your surroundings and things that Disney has set up. And this is what has really impressed me, because I knew Megan has different ideas and stuff on having educational Disney trips, but I didn't actually realize like the depth in which she was considering this. And so this here is really impressive to me. So I guess just, we have like a long list of things, and we're going to point out a few of them.
So, you can head into the Main Street Cinemas over there on Main Street in Disneyland, and it has 6 different old cartoons. I mean, we're talking from like the 20s and 30s running on different screens. None of them have sound. So of course you're not getting the cacophony of sound hitting you, but you can, watch these, and it would be really interesting, to talk with your children about the differences between cartoons then and now. These cartoons are in black and white. Ours have color now. What do you see that's different about the styles of them? They only have stick legs and arms. They don't have, more fleshed out. They don't look so realistic like our current stuff does.
Yeah,
None of it's
like the spaghettiness of the arms versus like the joints.
And also, talking about the content of it as well. How would this be different today? And this might be something for a little bit older kids, or even, teenagers, but talking about like some of the stereotypes that you see in cartoons back then, like, does somebody always need rescuing? Does it tend to be the guy or the girl? One of the cartoons that they have in there features characters of a bunch of celebrities of the time, and I don't even know who half of them are.
Right.
But if you could
polo or something.
Something like that.
Yep.
So that could be something interesting. Also, we talk about time periods. Main Street itself, is supposed to be from the turn of the century.
You
heading
can talk
into
about the time periods and things that are going on there.
And if you look at like the cars that are going down the street, one of them is still pulled by horses. There was a time, and a lot of kids don't even realize this. I bet a lot of adults don't even, think about this, but there was a time where horse-drawn carts and motor vehicles existed on the road at the same time. That could be mind-blowing. I mean, go into the fire station and talk about, how they would have fought fires back then when they didn't have fire hydrants around and they didn't have engines. I mean, these would have been horse-pulled fire engines, fire tanks or whatever that went.
And they have like on the wall, like 6 or 7 buckets that they would, back in the day they would fill with water and kind of like pass them along the line to, I mean, there's really interesting stuff. I mean, and if you're looking at other things, Cars Land is built off of like Route 66. There's history there. The Jungle Cruise, you could, have a discussion on animals and different things like that.
Where the animals are found, which rivers you're going down, what animals are found there, what plants are found there. How are the natives portrayed? Do you think they still live like that today? Or, all kinds of, and the queue there too, this is jungle exploration from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's so much there too.
I do think though that during Christmas time, the natives did actually wear ugly Christmas sweaters.
Oh, you could be right. I don't know.
I wasn't there, so I can't prove it.
Frontierland, again, there's a lot that can be talked about. The early American settlers, the settling of the West, the steamboats that went up and down the Mississippi River and their importance in history.
Tom Sawyer's Island, you could talk about literature.
And Huckleberry Finn, who are these characters? Kids don't know that today.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much to learn there, and even with just a little bit of planning, you could have a couple of things that you would like to talk about a little bit while you're in line or whatever, and just looking at the surroundings and stuff. You could still have a great time at the Disney parks while still learn something, and make it worthwhile educationally. Yeah,
absolutely. The train stations, right now, while the train is not running, they actually have the train on display and like how a steam engine works over at the New Orleans Square train station. But all the time they have a display on steam trains over at the Main Street train station. It's a little bit of a mumble of words there. Grizzly Peak over at California Adventure, this is the national parks. There's things there about fighting fires in the parks. There's things about, you could talk about how the parks came to be. Who was it that decided to create these areas that would be protected, for all time, for everybody to enjoy for so many years. Tomorrowland, you can talk about space travel. You can talk about how technology changes. You can talk about how our ideas of what the future have changed over time. Back over to Disneyland, New Orleans Square. At Mardi Gras time, they have it decorated for Mardi Gras. Talk about what Mardi Gras is and, its history. Aside from that, you just can talk about the history of New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans has a long and very rich history. There's, I don't personally know very much about it yet. But, that this would be something that you'd have to find out more about ahead of time. But I bet probably most anybody who's got, some amount of knowledge has something that they could share with their kids about, various areas that, that they might not know. In Fantasyland itself, you could talk about where these stories came from. Mm-hmm. These are fairy tales. Where did the story of Peter Pan come from? Where did the story of Snow White come from? Things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And even just like Disneyland history itself,
right.
That will spur kind of a love of learning, which can be, carried into other aspects of lives and different topics.
Especially if you have a kid that doesn't see like there's any, value in knowing what happened in the past. Because, that's an attitude a lot of not just kids, but people get. If you can find something they are interested in and tell them about, the history behind it. Mm-hmm. That can kind of get them more thinking about, how things become the way that they do. Our kids right now are fascinated with the history of Disneyland, finding out what used to be in a certain place.
Yeah. And you know what? Even to take it a step further, talk to some of the cast members who are in the different places, and many of them will be able to give you more insight into where you are and, the history of things. If your kids are interested in, how like the rides work or whatever, right there, it's kind of a dead giveaway. You got to be good at math and science if you want to learn if you want to be able to create things later in life, How do you think these roller coasters were built, and to be able to be safe,
Yeah.
I'm sure you could, have a little conversation with some of the cast members about that. And, they love to share what they know, and they love to, help round out your experience, basically, so.
Yeah. I think we've exhausted our list.
And there is, that's just touching the tip of the iceberg, really. I mean, after we finish our Disneyland tips book, we're going to start coming up with different ideas and start putting out small books on ways that you can make a Disneyland trip educational. Just little things here and there, and maybe we'll compile it into something bigger later. Who knows? But I also wanted to point out to you guys, we have our Facebook group, which you can find by visiting gomousescouts.com/FB group. And this is a place where people we're hanging out, we're geeking out over Disney and, having fun conversations about that. But even more so, it's a place where you can go and ask questions and share your tips and your experiences on visiting Disneyland with kids as well. So we would love to see you guys over there. You have to request to be added to the group. It's a closed group, so we're trying to obviously keep out trolls and spammers and stuff like that. But we'd love to see you guys there. So come on in, join us, and you can also email us if you'd like us to cover a specific topic or something like that. Email us at fun@gomousescouts.com, and we will see you guys online. Thank you for listening.
Disney 98. Papa, what is